My name is Sienna. I'm 40, and for the longest time, I thought I had everything figured out. My life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, or so I thought. I lived in a small, quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. My house, tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac, was always buzzing with life, or at least it had been. 3 months ago, everything changed. My husband, Mark, walked out. There wasn't a fight or a dramatic argument. He left behind a short note on the kitchen counter, right next to the cold coffee I had made for him that morning. "I need space," it said. That's all. No explanation. No goodbye. Just nothing. I stared at the words, my hands trembling as if the paper weighed 100 pounds. The first few weeks after he left were a blur. I went through the motions of life. Working at the bookstore I owned, coming home to an empty house, eating meals alone at a table that once felt so full. Nights were the hardest. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong or how I could have missed the signs. I had no family nearby. My parents had retired to Florida years ago, and my younger sister lived halfway across the country. The only person I saw regularly was my neighbor, Rachel, who would pop by occasionally with her 2-year-old son. Her life seemed so perfect, so full of love, that it made my loneliness even harder to bear. Then came Liam. He was my husband's nephew, a college student who had just moved to town to attend classes at the local university. Mark had always been close to his family, and when Liam called me asking for a place to stay while he got settled, I couldn't say no. It felt like the right thing to do. After all, I had plenty of space, and maybe having someone around would ease the unbearable silence that had taken over my home. Liam arrived on a rainy afternoon, his car loaded with boxes and books. He looked so much like Mark when we first met, tall, lean, with that same crooked smile. I forced myself to look away when I felt a lump forming in my throat. "Thank you for letting me stay," he said, as he carried his things into the spare room. "I won't be a burden, I promise." "It's no trouble at all," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. I couldn't predict how this arrangement would affect me, but I hoped it might distract me from the gaping hole Mark had left behind. At first, Liam kept to himself. He spent most of his time in his room or at the university library studying. But gradually, little moments began to shift things. We'd cross paths in the kitchen, exchanging polite smiles. One night, he offered to cook dinner, and we sat together at the dining table for the first time in weeks. "You must miss him," Liam said softly, his voice laced with empathy. I nodded, feeling the familiar sting of tears I had been trying so hard to hold back. Liam had a way of making me feel seen, like he genuinely cared about my answers when he asked how I was doing. He wasn't just Mark's nephew anymore. He became my confidant, someone I could talk to without fear of judgment. And yet, as comforting as his presence was, it also stirred something inside me, something I didn't fully understand and wasn't ready to face. As days turned into weeks, Liam's presence began to feel less like an intrusion and more like a small comfort. He had a natural way of filling the silence, not with noise, but with his energy. The house didn't feel quite as empty anymore. Each evening, we found ourselves sharing more meals, our conversations growing longer, more personal. It started innocently enough. He would ask about my favorite books, pulling them off my shelves to flip through while I explained why they mattered to me. I learned that he loved photography, showing me snapshots of places he'd been, the world through his lens. There was a warmth in those moments, a simple connection that I hadn't realized I was missing. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Liam walked into the living room carrying a mug of tea for me. "You look like you could use this," he said, with a soft smile. I was curled up on the couch, staring blankly at an old movie playing on the TV. "Thanks," I said, taking the mug from his hands. His fingers brushed mine, and I felt a spark, not just the warmth of the tea, but something deeper, more unsettling. I pushed the feeling aside, blaming it on my frayed emotions. It wasn't until a week later that it happened again. We were in the kitchen, washing up after dinner. I reached for a plate at the same moment he did, our hands colliding. We both laughed nervously, but the moment lingered a second too long. I caught his gaze, and for a fleeting moment, the air between us seemed charged with something I couldn't name. I told myself it was nothing. He was just being kind, and I was reading too much into it, but the small moments kept piling up. One night, we stayed up late talking about Mark, his childhood, his quirks, the way he used to light up a room. Liam listened intently, his eyes filled with an understanding that made my chest tighten. "You must have loved him a lot," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I did," I replied, my voice catching, "but love doesn't always feel like enough." Liam didn't say anything, but the look on his face said he understood more than I realized. I felt a pang of guilt, as though I had betrayed Mark just by sharing those words with someone else. Yet, at the same time, I felt lighter, as though Liam had taken some of the weight I'd been carrying. As the days passed, I began to notice how much I looked forward to seeing him. I found myself lingering in the kitchen when I heard him coming downstairs, or waiting up just to hear how his day went. It was harmless, I told myself. I was lonely, and he was kind. That's all it was. But deep down, I knew better. There was a part of me that craved his attention in a way that I couldn't justify. The way his eyes lit up when I laughed, the way his voice softened when he talked to me. It was more than kindness, and I couldn't deny how it made me feel. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Liam turned to me. "You've been through so much," he said. "I don't know how you do it." "I don't have a choice," I replied, my voice wavering. "I just keep going." "You're stronger than you think," he said, his gaze steady. There was something in his eyes that made my heart race, a mix of admiration and something deeper. I looked away, afraid of what I might see if I held his gaze for too long. The tension between us grew with each passing day. It wasn't something we spoke about, but it was there in the quiet moments. The way his hand would linger a second too long when he passed me a plate. The way his voice softened when he said my name. It was there in the way my pulse quickened whenever he was near, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Liam came into the kitchen. "You should let me help," he said, taking the dish towel from my hands. "You've done enough for today." I wanted to argue, but the way he looked at me made the words catch in my throat. He reached past me to grab a plate, his arm brushing against mine. The touch was so brief, so fleeting, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I stepped back, my heart pounding. I should go to bed," I stammered, avoiding his gaze. "Sienna," he said, his voice soft. I froze, my hand gripping the edge of the counter. "You don't have to keep everything bottled up. It's okay to let someone in." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment I felt like I might drown in the emotions they stirred. I turned to face him, my eyes searching his for answers I couldn't bring myself to ask. But before I could say anything, he stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Good night," I replied, my voice trembling. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he looked at me, the way he made me feel. It was wrong. I knew that. He was Mark's nephew, for God's sake. But the loneliness I had been carrying for so long felt unbearable. And Liam had somehow managed to ease it in a way I hadn't thought possible. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between what I knew was right and what my heart was telling me. The lines between what I wanted and what I could have were becoming increasingly blurred, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep myself from crossing them. It was a Friday evening, the kind that felt heavier than it should. The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, and the rhythmic sound against the windows filled the house. Liam and I had just finished dinner. I could sense something unspoken hanging in the air between us, a tension that had been building for weeks. As I cleared the plates, Liam leaned against the counter, watching me. "Sienna," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. I turned to face him, clutching a dish towel as if it could steady me. "You've been doing everything for everyone for so long. Don't you ever let yourself just feel?" The question hit me harder than I expected. "I don't have time to think about that," I replied, avoiding his gaze. "There's too much to figure out, too much to handle." "You don't always have to be so strong," he said, stepping closer. "It's okay to let someone be there for you." His words were kind, but they also carried something more, a quiet intensity that made my heart race. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it. "Liam, this isn't—" "Isn't what?" he interrupted gently. "Isn't allowed? Isn't fair? I know it's complicated, but I also know you've been hurting. And I hate seeing you like this." My breath caught in my throat. I felt exposed, as though he could see every crack, every weakness I had been trying so hard to hide. "You don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "You're Mark's nephew. This isn't—" "I'm not trying to replace him," Liam said, his tone firm but soft. I care about you, Sienna, more than I probably should." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. My chest tightened as I struggled to find the right response, but none came. Instead, I felt a wave of emotions crashing over me: guilt, longing, confusion, and something I couldn't fully name. Before I could stop myself, I said, "You shouldn't say things like that." "But it's the truth," he replied, his eyes locked on mine. "And I think you feel it too." I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, my silence spoke for me, and I saw the flicker of hope in his expression. It terrified me. "I can't do this," I whispered, stepping back. I can't cross that line." "I'm not asking you to," Liam said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I just want you to be honest, with me and with yourself. You don't have to carry all of this alone." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. "This isn't fair," I said, my voice cracking. "To you, to me, to Mark. It's not right." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but that doesn't make it any less real." The next moment was a blur. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly the space between us disappeared. His hand brushed against mine, and then he was holding it, his touch both comforting and electric. My heart pounded in my chest as he leaned in, his forehead resting gently against mine. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I will." I opened my mouth to say the words, to tell him this was wrong, but nothing came out. Instead, I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I stood there, caught between everything I knew and everything I felt. Then, before I could think, I pulled away, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "I'm sorry, Liam, I can't." The look on his face was heartbreaking, a mix of understanding and pain. He stepped back, giving me the space I so desperately needed but didn't know how to use. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to make things harder for you." "You didn't," I replied, though my voice was barely audible. "It's not your fault." We stood there in silence, the sound of the rain outside the only thing breaking the tension. Finally, Liam nodded and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I leaned against the counter, tears streaming down my face, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I knew I had done the right thing by stopping it, but the ache in my chest was undeniable. I had crossed a line I never thought I would, and there was no going back. The bond between Liam and me had changed, and no matter what happened next, things would never be the same. The next morning, the house was quiet. Liam's door was closed, and I didn't have the courage to knock. I busied myself with chores, trying to keep my hands moving so my mind wouldn't wander, but it was useless. The events of the previous night played on a loop in my head, every moment, every word, every unspoken feeling. I felt a deep ache in my chest, a weight I couldn't shake. Guilt twisted inside me, but it wasn't guilt alone. There was something else, a longing I didn't want to acknowledge, a quiet wish for something I knew could never be. I had crossed a line, and though nothing had happened, the boundary between us was forever blurred. As the hours passed, I found myself staring out the window at the rain-soaked yard. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, tired, conflicted, and lost. I tried to piece together who I was now, after everything. Was I still the loyal wife mourning her husband? Or was I someone who had let her own loneliness cloud her judgment? Maybe I was both. By late afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to talk to Liam. I knocked softly on his door, my heart pounding. He opened it after a moment, his expression guarded but kind. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded and stepped aside, letting me in. We sat down, the silence between us heavy and awkward. I struggled to find the right words, but nothing seemed adequate. Finally, I said, "I'm sorry for last night." "You don't have to apologize," Liam replied, his tone gentle. "I shouldn't have said what I did. I care about you, Sienna. I care about you more than I should, and I didn't know how to keep that to myself anymore." His honesty cut through me, sharp and painful. "I care about you too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not right. You're Mark's nephew, your family, and I don't know how to reconcile what I feel with what I know is wrong." Liam nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I get it," he said. "I really do, and I don't want to make things harder for you. Maybe it's best if I move out." The thought of him leaving sent a pang of fear through me. but I knew he was right. "I think that might be best," I said, though the words felt like a betrayal. "It's not because I don't value you, Liam. It's because I do." For the next few days, we barely spoke. Liam began packing his things, and the house felt emptier with each box he carried out. I found myself lingering near the spare room, listening for the sounds of his footsteps, his quiet hum as he worked. When the day came for him to leave, I stood at the door, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Thank you for everything," Liam said, his voice steady but sad. "You've been there for me in ways I can't even put into words." I smiled weakly, tears threatening to spill. "And you've been there for me too," I said, "more than you know." We hugged briefly, a moment filled with unspoken emotions. Then he was gone, and the silence in the house felt deafening. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild the walls I had let crumble. I threw myself into work at the bookstore, spent more time with Rachel and her son, and even started therapy to sort through the tangle of emotions I had been carrying. But no matter how busy I kept myself, I couldn't forget the way Liam had made me feel, seen, valued, and understood. I often found myself questioning my choices, wondering what might have been if things were different. If Liam hadn't been Mark's nephew, if Mark hadn't left me, if I hadn't been so desperate for connection. But life isn't made of what ifs. It's made of the choices we make in the moment, and I had to live with mine. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I thought about the lessons I had learned. I realized that my loneliness hadn't been about Mark leaving or Liam stepping in. It had been about me, about the parts of myself I had ignored and the needs I had buried. I had been so focused on being everything for everyone else that I had forgotten how to be there for myself. The experience with Liam, as painful and complicated as it was, had taught me something important. Connection is essential, but it has to come from a place of honesty and respect, not just for others, but for myself. I couldn't let my loneliness dictate my actions, nor could I rely on someone else to fill the void I felt inside. As I reflected on all that had happened, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Regret, yes, but also a sense of growth. I wasn't the same person I had been when Mark left. I wasn't the same person I had been when Liam arrived. I was still figuring out who I was, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. And as for Liam, I didn't know if I would ever see him again. Part of me hoped I would, if only to know that he was okay. But for now, I had to focus on myself, on rebuilding my life, one step at a time. The rain started again outside, a gentle patter against the windows. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me, a reminder that storms don't last forever. The aftermath might be messy, but it's also where growth begins. Life is complicated, and sometimes the lines between right and wrong become blurred when emotions take over. Sienna's journey of loss, connection, and self-discovery is far from over. What happens when the ghosts of the past and the promises of the future collide? Will she find closure or be haunted by what might have been? If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Sienna's place? Would you have let Liam stay? Or was letting him go the right choice? Share your perspective in the comments below. It might just spark a conversation that changes someone's outlook. If you want to follow Sienna's journey and find out what comes next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life, ones that dive deep into the complexities of the human heart. And don't forget to like and share this story with someone who loves exploring the gray areas of life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of Sienna's story.